Welcome to another episode of the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Dave Peltz, and along with me is my esteemed colleague, Dr. Joe Hamlett. How are you doing today, Dr. Joe?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Dr. Dave.
Awesome, awesome. Welcome back to our viewers and listeners. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is your umpteenth time, then that's awesome too. We are the Personal Professional and Career Development Podcast. We love to have guest speakers, and as you see today, we do have, or well, if you're visual, if you can see the visual, you can see we have a guest speaker. If you're listening, I guess I just announced it. We have a guest speaker today, Major General Retired Brad Spacy. How are you doing today, sir?
Every day's a holiday. Every
Every
meal's
day's
a
a
feast. Yeah,
every day's a holiday. I love that.
that's
All
right.
right. Before we announce the topic for today's show, Brad, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So grew up in a military family. My father was a colonel in the Air Force. My brother eventually retired as a colonel in the Air Force. I have two older sisters as well. I was the youngest of four. Despite what people think by our family background, I never intended to go in the military. I left home to be an actor in Hollywood and was working my way along, doing okay. Even had my 15 minutes of fame when I felt the call to serve and just considered enlisting in the Army. My father was Air Force. He said, if you go in the military, you'll go in the Air Force. So I thought if I worked hard, I could get a college degree and be an officer. And I did that. 6 years later, I was commissioned as an officer, intending to stay 4 years and then go back to Hollywood, make my fame. And one thing led to another. I got married, and my wife and I sort of took it assignment at a time. And we found the military was our home. And I began to understand why my father loved it so much. So, and here we are 32 years later, actually 37 years later now.
Wow.
And it's been quite a journey.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining us, Bradley, or Brad, I'm sorry, Brad.
Yeah, that's my mom and my wife. Yeah.
Yeah. So today's topic is demanding better, not doing better, demanding better. So this is a kind of a first for us. Mr. Brad, why don't you tell us about demanding better?
Yeah, I think that's the core, one of the cores of everything. It's all woven together, whether it's, your personal expectations, your goals, your dreams, your aspirations, or as a leader, how you want to lead an organization. I think you have to demand better. First, expect better. You have to learn to expect better, better, then demand more. And I think a lot of people get the wrong impression if you just say it like that. You
Mhm.
got to talk about the whole, ecosystem or environment or life that operates in. Um, so
Yeah.
for me, it's all tied together on this topic with leadership and being a leader. And
Mhm.
it's something you learn over time. I think people forget that a lot of leadership, in fact, most of leadership is teaching.
Mhm.
And I think once you know where you come from, what you believe in, what you're worth, what drives you, fuels you, your strengths, your limitations, all those things that people do a very bad job of evaluating. Once you've got a pretty good feel for that, then you've got to start teaching others to live in that environment when you're the leader. And I think where I say demand better comes from the expectations.
Yeah.
Brad,
Go
I
ahead.
think you touched on something at the very beginning when you said if you just throw that out there, people maybe kind of step back like, okay, who is this guy asking me to demand better? So that
Yeah.
was going to be my question. How if you come in here with that approach, how do you get people to buy into that? I mean, because again, that's that from the outside looking in. If somebody just came to me, I'm going to be hesitant, like, okay, who is this guy? Why is he telling me he demands better? He doesn't even know what I can offer at first, so now he's telling me to demand better. So how do you get people to jump on board that that wagon?
Yeah, that's, like I said, it's all part of a larger, system or environment or process, if you want to call it that. But it comes from how we set up life. I was raised, I've talked about my father a lot because he was such an important person in my life, love him to death, but he demanded better. And he taught, especially my brother and I, to excel in everything and to want to excel, to be better, to want better, to do better, and to not accept failure, to not entertain failure. And I think the way he did that is the way I do it with people, or at least that's what I work to do, is set the example. I demand better of myself. And I do that every day, and I let people see how I'm doing it every day. And I think we often teach people the wrong thing with the best of intent. We tell people, we try to teach them what is possible, and then you'll see people, they say it on bumper stickers all the time, or leadership, books. You need to teach people what is possible, and I think that automatically sells them short. I think if you're successful, you teach them that anything is possible. Once they start to get their mind around it, because if you tell them what is possible, that's your interpretation of what is possible. You
Right.
don't know what their possible is. Once they learn to free their mind and think that anything truly is possible, then they start to get their mind around wanting to get there. And in order to do that, they have to demand more of everything. It's not just themselves. It starts with yourself. Then you demand more of the environment, more of your coworkers, more of your leaders, more of everything. It's a good thing though. It's not like you run around with a whip
Right.
just pounding people. It's built on hard work. It's built on all those things that we build into many corporate, I think, core values and many corporate mission statements and visions. Certainly in the military, it's built on integrity and the idea of service and the idea of excellence. Each one of those concepts are subjects of books. Well, once you understand that and embrace that, then you begin to realize that anything is possible. If everybody's working off that same sort of understanding, once you get there, then you're ready to begin demanding better, demanding more. Because then you have the
Okay.
credibility to do it. You're living that life of integrity.
Yeah, and I like what you said early on, Brad, about one of the first things you need to do is set expectations, and then lead by example, and
Yeah.
then there's the accountability piece afterwards. Because
Mm-hmm.
many of the viewers and listeners know that Joe and I are also prior military. We were on the enlisted side, but if you just say do as I say, not as I do,
Mm-hmm.
which is a very negative default for a lot of military managers, supervisors, and leaders, it sets a different precedence than here's my expectations. I'm going to show you and lead by example. I'm willing to jump down in the dirt with you and paint or whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to hold you accountable to do the same thing. We're in this together, and that's that accountability of self and accountability of others. And I think that's an important thing that you brought up about leading by example and setting the expectations, because it is critical to the process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so this goes down so many different rabbit trails. For me, it's built on a life of self-examination, where I came up with different, core beliefs beyond core values, but things I operate off of. And one of those, you kind of touched on it, it's accountability. But it doesn't start with accountability. For me, it starts with gray area. You hear people all the time talking about the gray area of life, and they actually celebrate it a lot of times and use it on their benefit. It was a gray area, so we exploited that gap in the rules.
Mhm.
And I think that's wrong. I think that's a weak leader's excuse to avoid accountability. It's always, oh, it's a gray area. It's not my fault. It's the system's fault. And I think once you begin clearing up the gray, because people like clear guidance, right? They want to
Yeah.
know how success is defined, what failure looks like. They want to know what the rule sets are. And if there are boundaries, they want to know when they're going outside those boundaries. It's hard to expect more of yourself when you don't know what the boundaries are.
Right.
And I think leaders' obligation. People say, "Well, you're being naive because there's gray area everywhere." Well, sure there is. I think it's a leader's job to clear up the gray area. And when it comes to them, I used to tell commands. I had 6 commands in the Air Force, and I told every single one of them, if you find gray area, go up through your chain of command or someone you trust to clear it up. And if you can't, come see me. I will clear it up. I will, before it leaves that base, it will be clear. You may not agree with me, but there won't be gray area. And I think people want that. So when you talk about accountability, once you've cleared up the gray area, I'm an accountable guy. I cleared it up. I said this is right, wrong, good and bad, win and lose. Hold me to it, and just know I'm going to hold you to it as well. It's a two-way street. I think
Wow.
once you
Yeah.
get in that environment, I think you see it on athletic teams sometimes that perform at a very high level. I hate using those examples because they're too easy, because they're obvious examples. They perform at a high level because the team gets it. They expect themselves to do better. People talk about Tom Brady all the time, and I love Tom Brady for many reasons. People may like him or hate him, but he says publicly what he believes, and I guess you can when you're the goat in football. But he talks about set incredibly high standards for people and expecting them to achieve it or get off the team.
Mhm.
You know, if you're not ready to perform at this level, and get off the team because we're here to win. Now that sounds harsh, but if you're going to be the top 1%, that's what it takes. That's what it is. And there's joy in that, right? This is not a miserable place to be. This is a fun place to be once you learn how to, get out of this right here.
Mhm.
I think you touched on several things that's very important. You touched on the fact, the accountability,
Mm-hmm.
the expectations, defining success, and then the one I'm going to go back to your first segment where you talked a little bit about. Um, oh, it escapes me. I just had it there.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot.
Helping people understand that anything is possible.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that right there is a definitely an approach to help people understand. You're right. You give them an out if you say, "This is what I think your pops are capable of," because again, that's defined by our own perception, our own thoughts of
Mm-hmm.
what they're capable of. But when you let them know that the sky is the limit, basically, that yeah, that I really like that approach because again, it takes away or it minimizes, eliminates all those ways to get out of this by saying anything is possible, and if you want it, then you got to work hard at it. So I
Yeah.
really like that approach.
That's the asterisk people forget about. Anything is possible. Asterisk if you're willing to work for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
And
one thing I enjoyed about the military was they set those guidelines. You do XYZ 1, 2, 3, then you're eligible for promotion. You do your time, you do your service, you do extra work, you pass your tests and fitness, and that's what takes you up the ladder. And in corporate America, I learned early on that that's not necessarily accurate. They like to dangle the carrot a lot, I found. And it's like,
mm-hmm.
I always ask, what do I need to do to get to the next level? And they're like, well, let's just see how you do. Okay, you did those 20 things. Everyone else is doing five. What else can you do? And it's like, holy cow. And then, and so to your point, there was a lot of gray area that was left undefined intentionally, and that always struck me as a major concern because you can't have an expectation to achieve a goal if that person doesn't know what that goal is. Is it running 100 yards, or is it putting a little white ball in a hole 300 yards down the fairway, or drive 55, stay
Mm-hmm.
alive? I don't know, but what's the expectation? You can't just say just keep doing what you're doing and I'll let you know when you get there. That reminds me of when I was a senior manager uh, for um, for a team, and part of that requirement was to get a state certification. And when I came on board, the pass rate was only 60% because the state pass rate was 70%. You had to score 70% or better. So before I came in, of all the people that were taking that exam, only 60% were passing. And I got with my team and I said, we need to train them better. We need to set the expectation that they pass our program not at 70%, but at 90%. So we set them up for success. And we did. We set that expectation. We set that bar at 90%, and every one of them reached it in our program. And every one of them, we went from a 60% pass rate to a 90% pass rate. And those that didn't make, the one or two that didn't make it, that retested, wound up getting their license.
Mm-hmm.
So it's to the point of setting realistic expectations and providing them the support and education that they need to be successful, and working with your people, not just saying, hey, go do your thing. I'll let you know when you pass or fail. That's not what it's about. It's about growing and developing people. And to your point earlier on, you said you did a lot of self-reflection, a lot of, introspection and understanding what's important to you. And that's something that Joe and I talk about all the time. You have to understand yourself and those around you and help them understand themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough to do. I think so you said a lot of things there, and any one of those could be worth another 30 minutes. But even expectations, I think, yes, I agree. You want to set realistic expectations to a point. That's to get the mission done, whatever the company is. But it's good to know that you can go as high as you want to,
Mhm.
or as you know. I like to know. In fact, growing up in the military, I found that most people don't understand this at all, and I use that to my benefit all the time because I loved doing what I love this environment. So my path to personal, growth was I exceeded everybody's expectations whenever I could. I mean, and for me, that was that relentless pursuit of excellence. I didn't want to know that someone expected me to get 70%, although for me, that would have been a pretty good expectation. Um, I wanted people to say, just go do good. And I would come back and redefine what they knew good to be. I would redefine that for them. And they were like, oh my God, I didn't know that was good. I was ready for this.
Mhm.
So, but in the practical day to day, you're right. You set those realistic expectations so people can work towards them. I think a big difference I've found in the military and in now being in the civilian business world for a few years, and people really get mad at me about this, but is that baseline understanding of core values. A lot of companies have those. In fact, they all do now because it's the very vogue thing for the last 15, 20 years. But I would argue that people don't necessarily live those. They might embrace them day to day. Sure. In the military, we live those.
Yeah.
For the Air Force, it's three of them, but those are part of how you know the person next to you is at work doing the life critical job they're expected to do so that others may live. It's
Mhm.
it's higher than showing up for work on time and don't cheating on your sick leave.
Right.
It's a
Right.
purity of effort. And so when the goal in the business world is making money, because that is the goal, and there is no other goal, everything is subordinate to that. It changes things. And so people think
Yeah.
as long as they're, I think leaders, business leaders always cracks me up when people use that word, but business leaders do that. As long as they're making money, they feel like they're successful business leaders. Your personal life doesn't, it may to certain individuals matter, but in the big picture, it doesn't matter. Whereas in the military, it does matter. We're the people that wake up at midnight and go help people find food. We're the ones that go let their dogs in or out or take care of the families while they're out of town. Civilian businesses don't do that. It's just a different understanding of shared beliefs. So
Right.
I've been very disappointed in the civilian business world, even though I sort of expected that when I came out.
Yeah, and I want to go back to something Dave said, when he talked about intentionally left out, leaving it gray, the area gray. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll really challenge that because I hear that you're saying it's intentional, but in a lot of cases, I believe it's just that they don't know, that they don't have that experience. They're not the leaders like Brad's talking about that live it. They're only, at a certain level. One thing we're all fortunate with is that leadership development, that leadership training that you get in the military, where corporate America doesn't necessarily have
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, if you get leadership training, it's typically something you've gone out and done for yourself, and it may not even align with those business goals. So you
Mm-hmm.
may just be out there on an island by yourself if you choose to do that. So I think, not to say that you were wrong, Dave, but I just think a lot of it is that there is no structure for people to understand. Like you said, we live those values, but companies say they have these mission statements and goals and values, but like you said,
Mm-hmm.
the bottom line still comes down to the dollar. So that's
That
a
is the bottom
different
line.
motive. Yeah, that's a different motivator for a lot of people. Even if they've gone down the path of, okay, I've got all this leadership training and skills. When it comes down to, when it affects the bottom line or the dollar, then things change. And then that person puts on a different hat because
Yeah.
now it aligns with the business goals or the
Yeah.
company goals to
And to
make
your
money.
point, Joe, I think you clarified it a little bit better. Intentionally leaving it gray is because they don't have the skills. They don't
Yep.
go out to seek and find those skills, and they're just there for the status quo.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I need to put any more effort in when I'm already fine where I'm at? They're deliberate about and intentional about doing things and not doing things. So thank you for clarifying that.
No, you're spot on. Yeah, a lot of times it is left gray because you're right. I've worked in the same type of environment. You come and say, "Hey, this is what I offer." and it's way down here. And then like Brad said earlier, you come in here and their expectation is here, and then you raise it to here, and they're like, oh my goodness, I didn't know that, that was
Or we
a
don't want it that high.
capability. Right.
Yeah, but I think most people do want it that high. They just have to learn how to want it that high.
Exactly. That's the
Yeah.
point. There it
I
is.
think people come in with too low of expectations on everything, and I think every generation is critical of the one after it. My dad, to hear him rail about how we've let the military go during my career. Of course, I see that in the military today, and the next generation will too. But over time, I do see people expecting less, not expecting less to be given to them. I see more expecting more to be given to them, but expecting less out of life. I was taught, and again, from a very young age, that life was a big, giant opportunity of amazing adventure. Go get it. I mean, my dad was a pretty conservative Air Force colonel. You think the idea of his son going to be an actor in Hollywood was his first choice, you know? And if you put Vero man in the dictionary, my dad would be next to it. And the idea of Hollywood actor would probably be his opposite end of the spectrum, even if that's not true. That's how
Right.
he saw the world, but he supported it 1000% the whole way. And I think that takes a certain amount of understanding what the world has to offer. He taught me to expect a lot, and I was going to go find it, and he let me go do it. Now he didn't intend me to go that way, but that's what he taught. You got to, and I say that because in organizations and leadership, and I would argue in business, you want people to do that. You want to teach them anything is possible. Now, on the leader, you got to be good with that. I've just said anything is possible, and people come back with all this new anything. I can't go, well, that's wrong. That's the wrong possible.
Yeah.
I meant anything's possible as long as you stay in this well-defined environment over here that I like. Well, then you've just done it wrong. You got to make sure you nurture that along the way. And
Yeah,
the
and I
worst
think
thing is an empowered person who's not truly empowered.
yeah, and I think that's
Right.
what the military did well for a lot of us is that they taught us how to see what the expectations were and then how to achieve those expectations and then see what the next level and the next level and the
Mm-hmm.
next level like the title of this episode is demanding better. They demand
Mm-hmm.
better at this level, and then once you hit that level they demand better at the next level and the next level, and that's, I think, it's energizing to the people that are in that environment because it always gives them something to look forward to,
Mm-hmm.
so they don't, so most of them don't stagnate.
Yeah, I think we do badly in the military to be critical of our whole, um, leadership or career development system, which is very good. I don't think people fully understand what it takes. They get too much of that as long as I do my PME, as long as I, have the right job and I do this and do this, it'll equal this undefined level of success. There's a lot of stuff in there that has to happen that you learn over time or you don't. I've encountered many a young officer once I was a general asked me how to be a general. I said, well, I can't give you a cookie cutter for that. I can tell you the things that get you in the fight, you know, and then there is, and it's a gray area I can't define for them, but I tell them I can't. I can't define this gray area. It's how will you do here, what impact it has, and who notices, and then how will you do here and here and here and here. I tell them look at the wall as a giant bracket for like a reverse bracket for basketball or something, and every single separation is a decision you make. It's not one the Air Force makes for you or the service. You make it. You decide, well, it's the weekend. I'm not going to go volunteer at the unit to
Yeah.
help build something. A little, and imagine a little tiny line down. And no, I don't want to take that remote tour because I want to stay home. Another little line down. Well, I want a big award. Maybe that's a little line up. And all of these equal a trend over time. You can't get to here after 20 years and fix that trend. It's like investing.
Yeah.
You can't, unless you have a lot, unless you get the Medal of Honor, you're not going to overcome a career of decisions where you took, I call it the easier route.
Yeah.
Who was there on Sunday cleaning the unit for the IG inspection? Were you there with the squadron commander, or did you not come in on Sunday? Because it's completely okay. Well, I mean, it all adds up over time, tiny little things. But it's hard to tell people that because they don't see the
Right.
world that way. They do like that cookie cutter.
Yeah. And that's the experiences I've had is people say, well, I'm meeting all these standards And that's exactly it. You're meeting the minimum standards. You haven't showed us going up above and beyond, doing things outside of the expectation. And you're right, Brad, that's what it is. That people, their body of work counts, not just the
Mhm.
things they did in the last couple of years, the last, tour. It's the whole body of work that you've done. And you're right. People start taking notice of those things where you took the easy way out, where you kind of stay stagnant, and then all of a sudden, you want this, um, you want these accolades because at the end, you step up and maybe take a tour, or you do some other things that make you stand out. But you're right, it is a body, and that's one thing I've even referred to it. Corporate America, when we did things, we used the whole airman concept.
Hmm.
And, all your accomplishments, like Dave said, your physical fitness, all these other things that you've done, that's what defines you, not just that last block. Or even if you were a troubled airman at the very beginning,
Yeah.
and then you changed that trajectory, and now you're, this outstanding airman. Then that's what we have to do, is look at that body of work and not just discount that early on stuff that you did that may not have been the best. So I like that approach as well. Is we have to look at the body of work, and I think that's where a lot of people get hung up, especially like in corporate America when they're making selections for promotions and things like that. They take that last 5 years that
Hmm.
that person has done all these amazing things, uh, but they discount everything else up to that point,
Well, in
because
corporate America, it's a much longer timeline too. The
right,
military is
right,
very short, 20,
right.
25 years is very small in the big picture. I think we're old enough too to remember. I mean, the days of recovering from something from a troubled airman time and becoming a chief master sergeant or a general or something, like those days are mostly over now.
Yeah.
You used to be able to do it. I think
Yeah.
I have a close friend from high school, was a buck sergeant, a troubled buck sergeant, and that used to be the instant NCO, the last automatic grade, and he
Mm-hmm.
was never going to be a staff sergeant. He had been in trouble. He had had Article 15s, and he turned his life around. He retired as a chief master sergeant, but that was 30 years ago.
Right,
That
right,
that
right.
time of that recovery, I think they start tracking it much earlier now
Yeah.
because the standards are higher, and for a long time the quality of training and everything was much higher. So you had people doing nothing wrong for all these years. Well, there wasn't room for that goalie save in here anywhere.
Right. Yeah.
But it's a little different now. I think it'll be interesting what the next 20 years looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we've got about 2 minutes left. Brad, what would you like to leave the audience with? This has been a wonderful conversation, by the way. I mean, I'm looking at the time going, wow, I thought we still had 30 minutes left.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Yeah. I would leave people with, first I would tell them, I like the Walt Disney statement, if you can dream it, you can do it.
Mm.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that comes with that, and you have to understand the obligation to be willing to work for it. And I would leave them with, but work is good and you will like it. If you learn to like it, you will like it. And that opens up so many possibilities because the world is a giant, exciting place full of opportunity. Go get it.
Joe, what would you like to, yeah, any final thoughts?
No, again, this has been great session. Just therapy for me.
Me
Just
too.
validating everything we talk about. I mean, just the expectations, the accountability. Again, and I really love the sky's the limit. Anything is possible. I really love that, and that's why many episodes I've talked about just being excited about tomorrow, because
Hmm.
anything is possible. And so that's what gets me up. That's what gets me on this podcast, and just get excited about what's coming. So yeah, thanks again for all your insights and being on the podcast. So thanks, Brad.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Fun to
and
be here.
this has been another great episode where, talking about people from different backgrounds and hearing their stories and their journeys. And there are a lot of common threads that we have among each other. It's just, how do you approach it, and what do you, to your point, what are those little decisions? I really, that's a big takeaway for me.
Yeah.
All those little decisions, ups and downs, that to me is just really powerful. What are you doing with those little decisions? So
Hmm.
um Well, thank you again, Brad, for taking time out of your day to join us
Yeah.
on the Journeys of Not So Ordinary People podcast, the personal, professional, and career development podcast. If you'd like to reach out to Brad, we'll have his information and description in the description of the show. If there's anything we can do to help facilitate that, just let us know. Reach out, share this episode, give us a like. We've got an upcoming webinar and we're seeking guest speakers for next year. So reach out to us. So with that, we want you to keep on being your not so ordinary you.
Yeah.